Welcome back to the GM Academy. Of course, I am your instructor, Jim McClure, and we are working through our 1.0 series of GMing at the game table. And this is taking us to our 1.05 class, which is the 10-minute rule. And is it just me, or there are a lot of rules and numbers seeming to pop up in this series? We had rule 0, we had the 60-second rule, and now we've got the 10-minute rule. Just seemingly it happens. But yeah, this is another interesting rule, and it's very focused on good player engagement and keeping things moving at the table. And the 10-second rule is fairly simple and straightforward, but has some major implications to it. And the rule states that everyone should get to do something every 10 minutes at the game table. I should specify every one of your players, each and every one of them, should get to do something every 10 minutes. Now again, very simple, straightforward, some very strong implications with this rule. But what it's to focus you, the purpose of the rule is to focus you on keeping player engagement across the board with all of your players, not focusing too much on any one player, certainly not focusing on GM time. Because like I said, this is a rule for your players' involvement, not the GMs. If all of your players at the table spend 10 minutes, spend 20 minutes, spend 30 minutes talking amongst themselves, in character, focused on the game, not on their phones or having conversations about work, but focused on the game, you're doing everything right as the GM, and you should just sit back and let them do their thing. But what you want to watch as a GM is that each and every one of them is getting an opportunity to interact. This is a game, after all. We do not want to have players that don't get to play the game or don't get to play the game for long periods of time. What other form of interactive entertainment is there where the players have to sit for 10, 15, 20 minutes and do nothing? Doesn't exist. You don't see it in any of the other medias. At tabletop, though, if a GM is not careful, this can happen to their players. And of course, what you're really trying to do is just keep your players actively engaged and keep all of your players actively engaged. That's the point of the 10-minute rule, to keep things focused. Now, I mentioned earlier there were some, sort of heavy implications that come along with this rule. One being this applies to everything. This is social interactions. This is combat. This is dividing loot. This is everything. And combat's the one where it can get tricky. Because depending on your system, combat can be crunchy, it can be bulky, and again, it's not that a player gets 10 minutes, it's that every single player at your table needs to do something every 10 minutes. So, the question then comes for people who have heard this rule. They go, well, all right, I have 6 or 7 players at my table. We move pretty quickly through combat, but it still takes 3-4 minutes per person. So we've got half-hour rounds of combat. How do I work this in with your 10-minute rule? And the answer is simple and straightforward, but it's not an easy choice to make, and that is ultimately we look at rule 0. We do everything for fun, for the enjoyment of the game. Now, if you've got 6-7 people at your table, you can't practically get to them every 10 minutes, depending on the system and depending on your GM skill. What that often requires is that maybe you need to have 2 separate groups. Maybe you need to play with 3 or 4 people in one group and 3 or 4 people in the other group. Break it up to give them their time in the spotlight, because is there really more enjoyment from 7 or 8 people, having mediocre fun and half the time that bored, or having 2 different groups of 4 people really enjoying themselves? And that's what you're going for. So there are, like I said, heavy implications with this. Again, the other thing is, let's look at a combat situation where, we have a combat going on that you're running. Player 1's involved in the combat. Player 2's involved in the combat. Player 3 is running a pacifist and doesn't do combat and sits back. Well, the 10-minute rule states they have to do something. They can't sit aside for an hour while we do the combat, or a half hour, or however long it takes with the system that you're playing. You need to, as a GM, actively engage and actively give them something to do. They need to have something. So while the combat's going on, you need to have another NPC come up and interact. So essentially, in turn order, maybe at the end of the initiative, their thing happens. Or maybe they're seeing reinforcements come in and they've got to warn. You need to give them something to do. Otherwise, they are going to sit and just spectate the game that they should be playing. So aside from all of that, the one last thing I'll point out to you as a GM is sort of to look out and facilitate certain, and this sort of pops up frequently with social interactions, but to make sure that one player's not getting too much of the spotlight. You know, if you're having you in this one PC, you as the GM and the PC are having a 20-minute back and forth engagement, it's in character and it's great, that's phenomenal for you and one player. But your other PCs at the table, again, are not getting to play the game. They're just watching the game. So you as the DM need to look and just go across the table periodically, every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, whatever it takes, and just go, who hasn't done anything in a while? Because again, we call it the 10-minute rule, but that's just a rule of thumb. You shouldn't sit here with a clock and go, all right, Jim just finished his last action, bam, I've got 10 minutes to get back to him. No, it should just be, generally speaking, about every 10 minutes, every single person needs to do something. Without that, they start losing interest. They start getting disengaged with the story that you're telling, with the game that you're playing. So you just need to, as the DM, pay attention to who is acting more and who is acting less. Who is getting engaged more, who is getting engaged less. And those that are not as engaged, either through their own choice or through your choice, you need to work with them. You need to work and give their character something to do. You need to have NPCs interact with them. You know, this big 20-minute conversation that this NPC and this PC are having, have him suddenly start directing things at the others, other questions at the other PCs. Even though you're having a good interaction, you need to get everyone involved and invested. So that has been the 10-minute rule. Again, a simple concept with very major implications to it. That has been our 105 class. Class dismissed. Thank you for watching the GM Academy. You can click the video to see all of our classes on GMing at the game table, and you can subscribe to get all of the latest information videos from the GM Academy. If you enjoyed what you saw here, please hit the like button. It really does help us to continue to put out quality information to the community. Again, thank you for watching, and thank you for your support.